What better time than when you need it most to build an experimental wood stove? Today, we're going to build something called a rocket stove. While my old one is fairly efficient, it's not nearly as efficient as it could be. Well, since they haven't plowed our road in 4 days, let's throw in some snowshoes, snowshoe down to where we put the culvert in last fall, dig some clay out of the ground. Clay is going to be one of our main materials that we are going to need. That's what we're looking for right there. There's clay. Got rid of all the topsoil. It's almost frozen. I really didn't think the ground would be frozen underneath, considering we got snow before it ever got cold. But it's actually just starting to freeze. I can just get through it with a shovel. So for now I can get what I need. I almost needed the backhoe actually to rip the frozen ground up, which I might have to do later on when we go to finish it. We're going to need a lot more clay. So for that, I'm probably going to have to use the backhoe, but for now, I can get enough with a shovel to get things started. Next, we had to remove the stove that I'm currently using. Well, we're finally ready to start building. In preparation, I'm going to add some hot water to the frozen clay so that it can unthaw and thin out because it's a little too thick. It needs to be like pudding almost. We also going to go get a part bucket of sand. We got to mix sand and clay together to create a basically earthen mortar mix that we will use to mortar the bricks together, but also to level the bottom of the stove for the very bottom brick. Okay, come on, Stingus. Come on, Stingus. Puppy stuck in hole. Come on, out. Come on, Stingus, out. Stingus, there you go. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to mix equal parts of sand to the clay that we had got earlier. The sand that came from my sand pit, which is a coarse kind of mason style sand, and then the clay. So we're going for roughly a 1-to-1 ratio. Minus the tree roots, I should have screened it, but it's a little wet. I add a little too much water, but it'll do its job. It's really hard to get the ice chunks broke up that's in the sand, though. Now that the old stove is removed, we can start working on the base. I got this old piece of concrete board that used to be under the old stove. I'm going to space it off the floor with a few old bricks, just so that we have an air gap underneath, which can allow heat to flow. Since this stove is going to be basically built right on top of the cement board, we're not going to have the air gap like the old stove that had legs. Now we got this really watered down clay. In technical terms, it's called clay slip, but it's also got roots and stuff because we dug it out of the ground. So we're going to pour it through an old window screen into a 5-gallon bucket, which then we're going to mix that with perlite. We're using the clay to stabilize the perlite to make a refractory insulation underneath the stove to protect the floor from excess heat. too wet. This is about the consistency we want. When you form a ball, you pack it, and you press 2 fingers on it, it pops apart. As you can see, I've arranged some bricks. This is basically the combustion core of the stove. That is going to be the hottest part. The mass around it is not going to be nearly as hot, so we're only going to put the insulation underneath the core itself, just to protect the concrete board from wicking too much heat into the floor. We're going to do 2 inches thick, which is what these bricks are, so we basically just make it level with the top of the bricks. Really simple, really easy. We are finally able to start building the actual batch box. This is all internal dimensions inside the fire brick. Our width is 5 3/4. Our height is 8 5/8. And our length is going to be 11 1/2. Then there'll be a 2-inch wide port, and then there'll be a 4-inch square on the back where it comes through the port into the riser, which will be insulated with the perlite clay mix when it goes up through a round tube. I know my masonry skills really suck. Screening the sand probably would have helped a lot. I know a lot of people are probably going to hate the fact that I kind of lined up the joints. What I've done is, because it's so small, I have actually extended it. It's only supposed to be 11 1/2 inches deep. I've turned it into about 13 inches now, or 14 inches, just to get anything longer than a 3-inch long block of wood into it. I did this outside in my test stove, and it seemed to work okay. So instead of cutting a whole ton of bricks just to try and do an overlap when the thing's only 12 inches long, I don't think it's going to be too big of a deal to have the seams lined up. Our next process though is we're going to move on and we have to cut the port. The port is about the only piece that I actually have to cut or even really want to cut on this thing. It's just cutting these fire brick is really hard considering all I have is an angle grinder. I don't really have the proper tools for doing it. So I'm trying to keep my cutting at minimum. So we're going to have a back on the stove which is going to be 2 bricks wide with a slit 1 7/16 inches up the center by 6 5/16 tall. That's what our port is. That's what you call the port in this thing. Half of 1 7/16 inches is roughly 3/4. And then we want 6 5/16 up from the bottom. Okay, that's completed. No one judge my masonry skills. I have 0 of those. I've never been good at masonry, and I really don't like doing masonry. Well, that's the whole combustion unit finished. You don't have to watch me with my terrible mortaring job anymore. It's ugly, but it'll work. It's going to be buried in a ton of this clay sand mix anyway, so you won't even see it once it's done. It'll just disappear. You won't notice it anymore. One thing, screen sand. I didn't screen my sand, and the gravel that's in the sand pit was causing a lot of trouble. Since it's wintertime, the possibility of air drying is basically non-existent. This is my heating source, so I need to get it dried out fairly quickly. I also don't want to start a fire in it right away and overheat the thing and crack the clay, because clay, if it's fired too fast, can also crack. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to light some tea lights, just put a bunch of tea lights in there to start gently warming everything up and slowly drying everything out, which will help stabilize the whole thing as we continue building as well. We're ready to start doing the riser now. For this stove, we need a total of 28 3/4 from the bottom of the burn tunnel basically to the top of the riser. So we have 9 inches already using the fire brick. I'm gonna use this hunk of 4-inch duct pipe that I picked up. So this is gonna be basically the inner mold. We're gonna pack that perlite clay mix around this and then pull this out. So this is just a temporary form. But so since we already have 9 inches and we need basically 29 inches, that means we need 20 inches of this ductwork to use for our form. As you can see, the candles have really started drawing towards the port since I put the duct pipe on. So it's obviously doing its job, and we're getting draft in the correct direction. For the outer half of our mold, I have a piece of 8-inch black stovepipe. Again, I'm going to cut it to 20 inches. This one will be staying in place. Since it's on the outside of the heat riser, the heat won't get to it and it won't burn out. It'll just kind of help stabilize everything. We're ready to start assembling the heat riser. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the center section in, and I'm going to pack a bit of that mortar sand clay mix that we had around it, only because of the square gap to the round tube. There's gaps. The perlite clay will fall through when we pack it in. So this is just basically a temporary form. We're going to let it dry out a little bit before we pack it. What we're looking to do by packing it is we don't want to actually crush the insulative properties of the perlite. We are just consolidating it all into one giant piece, or one giant mass. Next, we got to cut an 11-inch square opening, starting from the bottom, working our way up. That's going to allow the water heater tank to slide down over the burn tunnel to seal everything up. It's thick this morning. What is this, Dangus? Okay, Stangus, that's sharp. Yeah, you back up. You back up. That's sharp. Come on. Now that the tank's cut off, we're going to light a fire inside of it. There's a bunch of paint on the outside that I want to burn off because we don't want to burn that off on the inside. Let's burn that off outside where the smoke is not going to be poisonous. Well, that did not work well. It could not breathe well enough because there was no chimney at the top for it to draw properly. So inverting the barrel seemed to work a lot better. We got a lot more fire going, and this should burn the paint off. Well, after that display of pure stupidity, I think anything that was going to burn off has been burned off. I got it way hotter than it's ever going to get in its life. Well, as you can see, I got the barrel mudded in. I skipped showing you all that because it's getting extremely cold in here. It's minus 20 plus outside, as in below minus 20, depending on what time of the day. I haven't had heat on at all in here today, so everything's extremely cold. I'm extremely cold, so I just slammed it together so we can run a test fire, get a little bit of heat in. I know this nickel-plated ductwork is not normally used for wood stoves. In these things, so much heat is extracted through this barrel that by the time it gets to the chimney, it's not much hotter than what a furnace actually pushes through these. So it is safe to use. They don't make 4-inch duct pipe unless you go like really specialty and get stainless steel for those hot tin stoves. Otherwise, you can't get it in black. So it's really your only option is to use ductwork when you're into 4-inch. For 6-inch, obviously black stovepipe. 4-inch, you're stuck down to ductwork or a piece of exhaust tubing or a hunk of metal pipe, but you can't just buy 4-inch chimney pipe. There we go. I got it going the right direction. Everything's wet and cold, so I didn't want to pull the right direction. It works. That steam you're seeing off of the wet cob, it is not smoke coming out. Basically, as I applied it, everything froze. So now as it warms up, it's unthawing. I can still see my breath in here. It's still cold in here. But there is heat coming off the barrel. There is heat coming off everything. It feels oddly satisfying to have it burning. I still have to make a door and put the secondary air tube in and a whole bunch of other stuff. I've noticed that the exhaust is no longer making smoke, we're making steam. So we're driving moisture off, but we are burning complete. Well, it's been about a whole month since I recorded last time. As you can see, it's going still. It works really well, but it also really sucks. One thing I learned, these fire brick are too much for a 4-inch system. They take forever to heat up, but once it gets hot, it makes a ton of heat. It's really comfortable in here. It just takes a lot longer to heat up than my old stove does, but it's not hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold like the old one used to do. Once it gets warm, it's very, very consistent in here. And even without all the thermal mass, it still stays warm considerably longer into the evening than the old stove did. The old stove, basically as soon as you let it go out and went to bed, it got cold. This thing keeps warm for a couple hours because of the mass of the bricks, but I am going to tear it apart. That's the reason why I haven't added the thermal mass. I got to rebuild it with insulative fire brick, since these absorb too much heat and it just steals all the heat from the fire, so the fire can't get going. But it takes way too long to come up to temperature to burn properly, but also to output heat properly. That's just due to the thermal mass of the bricks. Replacing them with insulative bricks will solve that problem, and it'll be a wonderful stove, and then I can add the thermal mass to it.